I'm Willie, Dwayne, Francois III, Minister of Christian Education and Discipleship at Wheeler Avenue Baptist Church. Tonight, I preached from Luke 17, verses 11 through 19, talked about that leper that returned to Jesus, who was the Samaritan. I was really trying to get at the question of what does it mean to be excluded, what does it mean to be a problem, and then how Jesus can come and transform our situations from our numbness, our visionlessness, our voicelessness that is akin to the leper situation, but many of us feel that as well, and how Jesus meets us on the borders. And you know, as the leper, he goes, Jesus says, go show yourself to the priest. But that one Samaritan, he comes back. And I tried to wrestle with the question, why does he come back? And I realized that because of his Samaritan heritage, the Jewish priesthood would never accept him in the first place. So he comes back because he is not interested in catering to institutions and to persons that don't recognize his personhood, even beyond his condition. So he finds belonging, he finds community with Jesus, and Jesus heals him. Jesus, he gives him physical healing like he gives the rest of them. He also gives them sozo. Sozo's wholeness, his wellness. He gets a little extra for coming back to Jesus. And so he has to go back to the very world that rejected him, but he gets to go back whole. He gets to go back healed. And just really wanted the brothers and sisters to know that one, Jesus can't handle our problems. One, Jesus is not interested in validating our rejection, but also Jesus blesses us and empowers us beyond our wildest expectations so that we can live whole and free and flourishing lives even in hostile. Yeah, it's interesting how we have this ecclesiastical arrogance at times that we believe that by blocking people out of the church, which is what happens with the Samaritan. The Samaritan is not recognized by the priesthood, but he finds Jesus in the world. He finds Jesus in the streets, and I think that happens for so many young adults as young adults. Coming to church and they're being rejected for various reasons, or people are coming to church, ex-offenders, people who've been victims of sexual terrorism come to church and they don't find a place because there's nothing wrong with them, but there's something wrong with the institution. And it's interesting how we're able to find Jesus in the community, find Jesus in other avenues that empower us beyond anything imaginable from a church that a church could do. Proctor's contribution to the Christian ministry is so significant because few people realize that he was a mentor to King. Some of his intellectual commitments came from, yes, Benjamin Elijah Mays, but from Samuel DeWitt Proctor, how Proctor was committed to justice, but Proctor was also committed to the life of the mind in ways that a lot of preachers were not. Proctor had a PhD, and so I think that Proctor's paradigm for being committed to local ways of doing justice and global ways of doing justice, but also thinking about how to nurture, to be a good steward of one's mind as a prerequisite for doing effective and holistic ministry. I think that's one of Proctor's most enduring contributions in my reading. I think there's no better conference for seminarians than the Samuel DeWitt Proctor Conference. One, because actual training goes on here. And it takes the seminarian beyond the bounds of the ivory towers that we study in. And you see at the Samuel DeWitt Proctor Conference that the Tillich and the Moltmann and the Bart are being practiced. They're being put into action, or they're being placed on the ground to see how we can do productive work. I think Proctor is good at this. One, because it's a thinking person's conference. One, it's a thinking person's conference. But it's also an acting person's conference. That when you leave the Proctor Conference, you're energized to go and to do the work. But you take your head, and you take your heart, and you take your hands with you.